Okay, I'm going to start this Dharma talk with a story. And I'm happy. It's really today, I'm with just good friends. Nobody who I don't know. So, anyway, the story goes like this. For 1 year, Katagiri Roshi was the abbot of the San Francisco Zen Center. And he invited me to come along as his attendant. And I did. And he gave like 10 talks over the course of 2 weeks. It wasn't just at San Francisco, but affiliate Zen centers, Berkeley. I don't even know all the names. But after about 2 weeks, we were sitting, I don't know, together in a room. Maybe I'd made him some tea, and he had another talk to give, and he said, I just can't do it. I don't have anything left to say. He was pretty discouraged. And, I felt it, and I thought, oh, wow, this, this was the first time he ever shared anything like that with me before. Hello, Dwayne. And but I really felt his kind of just exhaustion and basically his pain. And he had a talk to get, I don't know if it was that morning or whatever, but he got up and he gave his talk, whatever. And but the reason I'm telling you that story is because I really don't have anything to say today. For one reason or another, I just don't have a good Dharma talk prepared. So that's my story. So here we are. I did, I'm going to start out with something and see what happens, but I'm kind of relying on you to help me out today. So, so I just picked up the subject of compassion, and I'll read a couple things, maybe share a couple thoughts, and then it's up to you to see where we go. This is from the book called Boundless Heart by Christina Feldman, and we studied this through one of our winter practice periods. And I'm kind of resonating or gravitating toward this because 2 weeks ago, we had a moving talk by Aaron Davis, who's here with us, on this, the sutra that this book is written about, called, what's it called? Can't remember right now. Someone help me. Metta. The Metta Sutta. Yeah, see. So it's kind of a little different from some of our Zen Buddhist suttas. Emphasizes more the heartfelt aspect of things. And then last week's talk, by Byakuran, was kind of in that same area. It wasn't like, you have to concentrate on enlightenment this moment, whatever. It was more about, how do we open ourselves up to the troubles, the sorrows of the world and inside of ourselves, and pay attention to those things and deal with them in a respectful way. So I'm going to, for Elizabeth and Carl, who just joined us, Tenru and Heartman, I'm talking a little bit about Boundless Heart right now, the book in the chapter 2, Compassion. And, we went through this in the winter practice period, but I'm going to just bring it up again because this is what I'm feeling about right now. So there's an interesting quote. I've never actually found out where it is, but they open this chapter 2 on, Christina Feldman does, on compassion, a quote from Helen Keller, which says, although the world is full of suffering, it is full also of the overcoming of it. So what's more Buddhist than that? I don't know if there is anything. And, to think of her life not being able to see or hear, she had to know something about suffering. So the chapter starts out, and I'll just read it. A young trainee neurologist found himself managing the case of a young man, Paul, who suffered irreversible brain damage after being involved in a catastrophic cycling accident. Confined to a wheelchair, arms and legs moved by endless spasms. On a ventilator, no longer able to communicate, he sat with a tortured expression in his eyes. The only part of himself he had any control over. Humanity seemed to have disappeared, leaving behind only, it appeared, the primal emotion of rage. He growled, howled, and moaned. Despite themselves, the nursing staff found it difficult to be around him. The neurologist found himself doubting the commitment to sustaining Paul's life. He clearly had no prospect of a better future and only an intolerable present. One day, he was present, the doctor, when the young man's sister came to visit, bringing with her Paul's pet dog, and witnessed a transformation he would not have thought possible. As the dog licked his hand and nestled against his legs, the rage ebbed. Paul's body calmed, and just for those few brief moments, he was a person, a brother, someone who was loved and mattered and could feel a bond with his treasured pet. He could respond to love. It was a moment, the doctor said, when I became acutely aware of how the failure of my own empathy had regulated this young man, in my eyes, to be someone outside of humanity. I saw only the pathology and not the human being, deserving of compassion. I'll just read a couple more things. At the heart of compassion is the invitation to turn towards suffering. Just as the longing for love, safety, and respect is a universal longing and story, so too is pain, a universal and inescapable story. Compassion asks us to take the seat in the center of the landscape of pain and distress. In the early teaching of the Buddha, he summed up his teaching saying, I teach only one thing. There is dukkha, and there is the end of dukkha. That's kind of like what Helen Keller is saying. There's suffering, and there's a way to overcome it. That's about it. Katagiri Roshi has another passage on compassion too. Though criticisms constantly come up, we can't attach to either positive or negative views. We have to see the positives and negatives as clearly as we can, accept them, and then continue with our lives, learning from our mistakes, forgiving others, and I'm going to say forgiving ourselves, supporting others so that we may all live in peace. This is the literal meaning of Dharma, to support or to uphold all beings. When Dharma works in the human realm, it is called compassion sometimes, and is called wisdom sometimes. So wisdom and compassion are the same thing. Well, that's my 13-minute talk. You know, I've said this a few times, probably all the rest of you have heard this many times, but I grew up in the Methodist tradition, and the sermon was never, ever longer than 20 minutes. You know, that was max. And then when I got into Zen Buddhism, it was like, oh, you got to talk for an hour. And I thought, what in the world does a person, what can they talk about for an hour? So that's my talk for today. But let me tell you a story. Kind of the most interesting story that's going on in my life right now. And when you hear it, you'll say, wow, do you ever have a boring life? If that's the most interesting thing going on. But anyway, I'll tell it to you because it's been a little interesting for me to observe. I came back to my lacrosse apartment on Monday. Yeah, today's Sunday, yeah. And I opened the door to my porch and there's pigeon poop all over the place. I mean, literally covered. And then I saw a family of pigeons. They have nested on my porch. And I've been watching them through the days. And keep in mind, bottom line is I don't want them there. You know, they're pooping all over it, making a big mess. On the other hand, there's these two little pigeons. I think they're probably siblings. And who knows if they're brother and sister, or brother and brother, or sister and sister, I don't know. But I was trying to get them off my porch. And, you know, I was doing everything, beating, you know, pots and pans, everything, but they wouldn't jump off my porch. And I realized they can't fly. They're not able to fly yet. So I just let them be there. And their mother comes back. I think it's their mother. Sometimes there's two bigger ones. And maybe they're the mother and father. I don't know. And anyway, just this morning, yesterday I noticed they were on my little, on my patio, I have a deck, I have a little table that's about 2 feet off the ground. And I noticed, oh, they're on my table. How do they get up to the table? And I realized, well, they can fly a little tiny bit. And so I made a lot of noise and you know, they're sitting here, they're ready to jump off onto the chair, which is like this far, you know, it's like less than 12 inches, but it's like 4 or 5 times. There's like, can I do this? Can I do this? And basically they did. And it was like a crash land, but a little bit of flapping. Anyway, I'm just it's kind of a crazy story. But I've been really kind of fascinated by watching them. And today, for the first time, they left the deck. I thought there might be this moment when the mother would like push them off. That's what I heard. What happens? We push them out of the nest, but I didn't see that happen. So anyway, that's my story. And 30 minutes before I gave this talk, the pigeons weren't there. They were gone. But now they're kind of back. They're coming and going now. So anyway, it's today I leave back for Hokyoji because they're shutting down the elevator for 2 or 3 weeks, my apartment, and even though I can walk up and down the stairs, I don't want to carry all my stuff up and down the stairs. So that's my story. And when I get back, I'm sure the pigeons will be gone. And that will be the end of that little story. But I have to say, that's about the most interesting thing that's happened to me this week. So watching these pigeons. I don't know what it has to do with compassion or anything else, but that's just where I'm at today. And okay, let's talk together.
All right. I'm going to see if I can unpin you. So people can come forward. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. Does anybody have questions? Or comments?
Mary, do you have something you'd like to say? Doesn't have to be a question, because maybe I won't answer it, but it could be a comment.
Thanks. Oh, Paul, you'll have to. We're in separate rooms today.
You and Paul?
Yeah. So there's an echo here.
Hi, Paul.
Okay. I have a story. Okay. Actually, I can hardly tell it without getting choked up. So I'm sorry about that. I appreciate what you said today. You said a lot in 13 minutes, 15 minutes. And I feel like that's certainly all I needed. So thank you. One of the things, you started out with compassion, and you linked compassion and wisdom. And I also was in a book study with you on the book, the Boundless Heart book. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first time that I'd ever, and this was just 2 years ago, or about 2 years ago, that was the first time I'd ever heard about the Brahma Viharas. Okay, so that's how new I am to those 4 concepts. Anyway, so this is how I would like to link what you said, because I immediately thought of this. Chimio Atkinson gave a Dharma talk a number of months ago, and she said, in our culture, knowledge is power. And then she said, why isn't knowledge love and caring or compassion? I mean, why isn't knowledge love and caring? I have a really close friend whose son was born probably 28 years ago. He's around 28. And he was born neurologically completely normal. And by the time he was 3 years old, 2.5, he had severe autism. He was nonverbal. He couldn't eat. He wasn't walking. He was severely disabled. And Paula, my friend, has spent her lifetime with her son, who's now in a group home, becoming knowledgeable on every noise that he makes, every screech, every scream, all of his sounds. She knows what his sounds mean. She knows what he's saying. She knows when, and it's subtle. A lot of it's very subtle. And she has worked with his caregivers, many caregivers over the years, to help them have knowledge about what her son Keenan is saying, is communicating. Keenan can walk a little now. He's still mostly nonverbal, but he can use sometimes words on a board to point to. He still has tremendous eating difficulty, so he's extremely thin, always an issue. But I just have been amazed at the love and compassion that she's had for her son and the knowledge that she has accumulated over the years that she teaches other people too. She shares that. Knowing what Keenan is, how Keenan is communicating, to help Keenan be in this world and have relationships and have connection to other people. So knowledge, wisdom is love and caring and compassion. And I think of my friend Paula and her son Keenan. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Mary. And for your information, I never knew about the Brahma Viharas until Carl introduced me to them about 3 years ago. Oh yeah, Hartman. You have to unmute. You probably realize that. But.
Somehow I lost, your screen disappeared on me. Anyway, one of the critical things that I learned when I first started reading about the Brahma Viharas and these 4 practices, John Peacock, who is a co-teacher with Christina Feldman, and he did the translation of the Metta Sutta that's in that book. And he's a professor at the Oxford Center for Buddhist Studies and this and that, but he practiced for a long time in India with the Tibetans. And he tells a story about they were working on compassion with a Tibetan teacher. And they'd been working on this particular thing for some weeks, it seems. And one of the students, when they were having a discussion, says, well, you know, compassion, you know, I've been working on this for weeks and I don't feel compassion. I don't feel compassionate. And the teacher turned to him and he said, feeling? Who's talking about feelings? I want you to act with compassion. Whether you feel compassionate or not, you act with compassion. And eventually you start to get used to it. It starts to become habitual. And then those things, you know, you don't feel kindly towards somebody, but can you act with kindness towards them. You're angry with someone. Can you be with compassion even though you don't feel that? This has been a really critical understanding for me, because I don't always feel compassionate or kind or patient. And yet, so it's not about the feelings. It's about how do I behave. Anyway, I always make this comment when we talk about these things. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Hartman. That's a good teaching. I don't always feel compassionate either, so I don't feel it, but I have to kind of act that way. So you just have to do it. And I don't feel uncompassionate, but it's just like, well, it's what I have to do as a job, my work. I was also going to say, Mary, when you were telling your story, my brother had a cognitive, he was disabled, and he had one of the last things he learned how to do was speak. He didn't learn how to speak at the normal rate. So when he was 7 or 8 years old, when normal kids would be able to talk and understand him, most people couldn't understand what he was talking about. But because I was his brother and I grew up with him, I knew what he was talking about. So to me one day, he went, something like that. I don't know but I knew exactly what he said. And someone next to me, and I kind of answered him, and this person said, "What did he say?" Like it was like totally undecipherable to that person, but I knew exactly what he was saying, and it was and before that person said that, I never really heard his speech impediment. It was just like, well, this is the way he talks. It's not an impediment for me, but for other people, they couldn't understand him. So, that's a little story. I'm going to call on people. How about you, Henry? What's on your mind today? Can you unmute yourself, Henry?
Kyoko, I think if you go into participants, you can unmute him.
Yes, I can. Well, let's see.
Hello, I don't know if I'm on or not.
You are, Ken. You can go ahead. Well,
Okay, good morning.
good morning. Good to hear your voice.
Thank you, and I want to thank Mary for sharing what she did. That brings us down to earth, puts our feet here where we know we are in the midst of this thing of being a human being and communicating and hopefully being of help and accepting help from everybody else and everything in the universe. It really humbles and changes our dialogue completely for me, the feeling about sharing our nice stories and things. Feeling deeply for the reality of what this life is a bit. So just want to express my appreciation to Mary.
Thank you. We're still not hearing you, Henry.
Henry, press your space bar. And while you hold it down, you can talk. I haven't figured out how to unmute him. I've got the participants up, but I can't help him.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. You know, I think another thing, we always think compassion of others, but I think the hardest thing is to develop compassion for yourself. And I think I remember having a practice period with Hoja-san, and I think we started maybe at 5 o'clock in the morning at the Zen Center, and I lived 10 miles away. So I had to get up quite early to get there at 5 o'clock. And, you know, I think the most useful thing from the whole practice period I had is that when the alarm clock went off, I didn't indulge in a dialogue with myself. I just jumped out of bed and went and did it. And I tell you, that's the most valuable thing I got from the whole practice period, is how just do it, no matter how you feel. You know, no matter what, my wife was nice and cuddly and warm, and it was so hard to get out of the bed, but I just stepped out, and that was it. And that's probably the most compassionate thing I could do for myself, is not indulge with my spiderweb mind and just do it. And finally, that's with everything. It's just very simple, being in this moment, step after step. And, you know, one thing, it makes life very gentle. And, you know, you even have compassion for the doorknobs. You don't want to grab them hard. It kind of grows. I think the fundamental fertilizer for everything is compassion. Yeah, I could kind of continue, but that's enough for the time being.
We have a new Henryism, fundamental fertilizer. I love it. Thank you, Henry.
If you're talking, Henry, we can't hear you now. I see your lips moving.
I'm sorry, I can only ask him to unmute.
Okay, now I think I'm back again, right?
Yes,
All
you are.
Yeah. I think, Dokai, the first statement from that you read, I think, is you see the great need of suffering, but at the same time, your potential for helping grows in proportion to the amount of need you see. And do you see, so it's never a reason to be discouraged. And you do your best work one step at a time. Just one step at a time.
I really believe that's the only thing you can do. Sometimes I get worried or anxious about everything I kind of need to attend to. But, you know, I say, well, right at this moment, I don't really have to worry about something. So it's just, well, there's always something to do, you know, to attend to, but just attend to it in this moment and the next moment, attend to it.
I think we should ask ourselves, what is missing in this moment? What is missing right now? And you know what? the only answer I have to it, that I'm not present.
Yeah.
That is missing. There's never anything missing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just my not being present. That is the big missing. You know, it's such a blessing to be alive, to see the perfection of it. You know, right now when I look at Europe and the fires and everything, it's so easy to be discouraged. And we certainly have serious problems. And at the same time, a lot of good people doing a lot of things. And, you know, finally, if I was in a sinking boat, I would bail water till the last breath. What choice is there?
Kyoku?
I just wanted to share something that's been meaningful in my life concerning compassion. Well, there's been a lot of it, but in reading about it, the Buddha actually repeatedly in the sutras tells the monks that they need to radiate compassion each day, that's part of their job. And I never really thought about compassion in that way, like, oh, okay, I should meditate every day, I should brush my teeth and, you know, get a good rest, all those kinds of things. But it really helps me not get lost in my own ideas and thoughts. I was struck, Henry, when you said we have to really concentrate on doing one step at a time, which, since that is actually the only thing that's possible, makes it kind of really brings home, well, where was I instead of here? Well, what was going on there? And realizing how much I live in thoughts, and that's really been helpful to me in how I move through the day, in just realizing I can always take refuge in this moment, and I can always just let the thought pass through.
I think we need to remember that, or pay attention to it, that Zazen is our greatest teacher. You know, that's just the way it is. It's all there, you just have to see it. And it's an ongoing practice. It's an endless practice. You know, it's like breathing. You're never done with it. So being present, you never have enough. You have never done enough work of being present. You always have to keep working at it.
Yeah.
You have to just be present. Isn't that the delightful job? Is to be present? Gee, I like to have something to do. And it, you know what, it does itself. That's, you know, it's so hard to talk about this stuff because, you know, words cover things up, really. You know, here's a little story. I was at Klusen's wedding with Hoji-san. Maybe some of you were in Wisconsin. And it was, I came very early, and I was one of the first, and Hoji-san and I were in the garden where the wedding took place. And Klusen's wife her father was an architect, and he had studied with Wright. And his house was really stunningly done. And we were in the garden, and the sun was just coming, and and there were flowers all over, and the birds were singing, and I was watching. And Hoji-san, we were only two together. And I said, "Oh, how beautiful." He gave me a dirty look. It took me years to figure that one out. Do you see, as soon as you name something, you distort it. And the silence is more rich. You have to say the silence was like eating the chocolate cake and me saying how beautiful it is looking at the recipe. That's how different it is, you guys. Yeah. So I got it. And people never understand, why would he say that? Well, first I was talking too much anyway. I remember giving him a ride from Hokyoji to Minneapolis, and we never said a single word all the way up. Hey, that was life-changing. I remember Steve Hagen telling me he went to Iowa with him, and Hoji-san didn't talk. And Steve said, "Jesus, that was the hardest trip I ever took." We're so into our talking and so forth. And I think with age, silence has to be our sweetness. It sweetens us, silence. We become like the ripe fruit on a tree that becomes sweet by sunshine. We need to bathe and have to be intimate with silence. Well, that's my clumsy reporting on my experiences.
Thank you.
Who else has something to share or say or ask? Aaron.
Well, let Aaron go.
Oh, Aaron? Oh.
I'll leave you some time, Yo-on. Thank you. Yeah, I was struck just by Carl's comment and also Kyoku's comment, and Henry, of course, in there too, the idea of the Brahmaviharas and the feeling, feeling's not the important part, it's the doing. And then Kyoku said that the thoughts go through, so thoughts, all these things kind of going through, but the action. And I was I think it's just timely, but I was recalling, I think it was a YouTube video maybe, on somebody was talking about emotional regulation. And she started by saying, people are always saying you need to be in touch with your feelings. You feel the feelings and be in touch with. And she says, you know what? Not always. And I wish, she'll say this much more skillfully than I will, because I don't quite get it. And it is a kind of an odd thing to say, but she was saying if you're having this intense emotional response, sometimes it's good just to be able to sort of say, oh yeah, that thing, I'm having this intense emotional response, and then kind of, okay, maybe I better step back and sort of give it a little time. And then once it's passed, I guess all the chemicals or whatever, and maybe thoughts are the same way, I don't know, but once those things have kind of, the flood has gone by, you're in a much clearer state to actually be helpful. And I'm probably compassionate too. I'm also very new to the Brahmaviharas, so I'm still trying to figure it out, obviously. But your 3 comments, thank you. It's very timely for me, because I keep hearing that, oh, let them pass through. But I think just sort of being able to absorb them is, interesting to me. So I appreciated that. Thank you.
So when Henry was speaking about Cliff and Theresa's wedding, it brought up a an interesting story that I think speaks to embracing the moment and people having compassion. So I think I've been at Zen Center about a year. I was about 23, and I was the person who was in charge of driving Hojo-san to the wedding. And the reason I was put in charge of that is because seemingly my car was the best functioning car around. And Tonio Tino was with us, Hojo-san, and Tonio Tino and I were in the car. And somewhere in Wisconsin, something happened with the brakes. And the car stopped working. And we had to stop at a repair place and got out of the car, and Hojo-san is walking around the car and he's kicking all the tires because for some reason kicking tires is some way to see what's happening with the car. It was kind of strange, but we realized the car wasn't going to get us any further. And so then we left the car at the repair place and we got on a Greyhound bus and just did what we needed to do to get to this wedding. And it was just like, okay, can't get there in the car. And Hojo-san was like, okay, let's get on the bus, with Tony's help. And so it was just not getting too freaked out and saying, okay, let's do the next thing. And so then we got to the wedding. And a couple people grumbled at me, but I think for the most part, Hojo-san was fine. And that was very compassionate. So I just wanted to share that old story.
Last call. All right. So let's end our time together with a couple of, first, thank you, Dokai, for not giving us a talk. It was a wonderful way to spend the morning. And let's see, my next job is to remind you that in the chat box, there is a place to make a donation if you so choose. As you know, we rely on those. And everybody's noticing that the spending power of their money is going less far, but we hope that you'll still continue making contributions to the Hokyoji mission. We've got coming up in August talks by Yushin, Dokai, Ado, Phoebe Reinhardt, and Shodo Spring to look forward to. In August, not too far from now, we're starting August with our community and family weekend. I'm pleased to announce that we found the Swan Pool so that small beings can refresh themselves. We will have the Jewel Mirror Sesshin with Reverends Daigaku Rume and Reiren Gumbel joining Dokai to lead us in soaking or pickling in silence, as Henry once said. And then we have a brand, you can't really sign up for these with us, but Compassionate Ocean will be coming in August. And we have a brand new person, Hong, who teaches Tai Chi and yoga. And he just visited a while back and decided that that was a good place for him to conduct one of his retreats. And so we're happy that people continue to enjoy themselves here, and they live with calmer faces than the ones they start with. As always, if you know how and you can stand it, please like us on Facebook and other social media. I think that's all. So let's close with the 4 vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thanks for being here, everybody. It was delightful.
Be well.
Bye.
All right, thank you.
So